Hey, Chairperson, the meeting is yours.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special board meeting of August 25th, 2020. This meeting is actually a long anticipated joint CDC Township Board meeting. Unfortunately, the current COVID situation delayed this process, and hopefully we can re-energize and move forward. I want to thank all of my board members, my Township board members, for being involved in this process and asking the questions and wanting to be inquisitive. And I certainly want to thank all of my CCD members for all of their dedication and input trying to complete a complex task, of which was a road that none of us have been down before. And so we've all added something. And I think all the meetings were very, very fruitful. We've been doing this for a little bit of time now. I wish we could have done a few more here in person, but it's time to start moving forward. And with the cross section of people that we have, I think it lends itself to some quality input and good information. So at this moment in time, what I'm going to do is call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, visible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, are you there, sir?
I am here.
Could you do roll call, please?
Mr. Cowell?
Here.
Mr. Lilly is here. Mr. Roman?
Here.
Mr. Ruggles?
Here.
Mike Powell?
Here.
Andrea Voorhees?
He will be joining us.
Liz?
Here.
Liz Smith?
Here.
Of 6 present right now.
Thank you. I would like to look for a motion to approve the agenda as noted.
Mr. Supervisor, really quick,
Yes.
could I ask for just one quick amendment just to clarify? New business 7A would just be to approve the DLZ proposal, just to clarify.
Correct.
So we just need to add DLZ to that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Let's say I will look for a motion to take the agenda. Mr. Lilly.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
Okay.
Or
Mr. Liz. Okay, Liz Smith. Thank you very much. Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Cowell?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Ruggles?
Yes.
Mike Powell?
Yes.
Liz Smith?
yes,
We have
Very
6 present.
Very good. Next item is public comment. If you are out there, you have the ability to comment on this particular meeting by hitting, I believe it's the *9 indicator, if I'm correct. And that will raise a hand. So is anyone out there?
We have no callers on the line.
Okay, very good. So seeing said, we'll close public comment and move right on into item 6, Civic Center Development Committee status update to the Board of Trustees and review draft of RFQ. And with that, I will turn it briefly over to Mr. O'Neill. Sean?
Thank you. I don't have a ton to say other than I'm looking forward to Howard kind of going through this presentation to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page, and any questions that may be out there from the group will hopefully be able to be answered tonight. And, you know, you'll see in the slideshow that you all received and as a part of your packet that you know, Howard's going to kind of recap where we're at and maybe talk about where we're going. We're going to maybe delve a bit into some of the contents of the draft RFQ that's not quite ready to go yet. And, you know, he'll share with you that process. And he's really the expert. I think he's forgotten maybe more about this process than most people will ever know. And I look forward to hearing from him again tonight. And then again, we'll talk a little bit later about the proposal that the board previously spoke about, that DLZ has before the board tonight. that is kind of just an additional piece to kind of putting this entire puzzle together. So we're able to move forward with a, I guess, a package for the development community to consider as we look for a future partner for the Civic Center development area. So that's really all I have at this point, unless someone has any questions.
Okay, at this time, Howard, the floor is yours.
Does everybody have our presentation in front of them?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to start by first thanking you for the opportunity to be here today, and with the recognition that, you know, our time frame has been a little off, but I want to talk about where we've been, what we've accomplished, and where we are now and where we need to go and how we're going to get there in the future, so that everybody is on the same page. And really the time frame just became a victim of the circumstances we all find ourselves in, which is the reason why we're Zooming tonight instead of being in person. There was no ability for any of us to control any of that. But our goal is to create, and I want to speak a little bit more than what it says just on this cover. We want to create a civic center that is different, that is unique, that is, you know, when we started this thing and some of the members of the committee said, you know, well, we like the way this is here, and I don't want to be like anybody else. I want us to be totally different, a unique situation in the market, yet it has to be White Lake and it has to feel like us. Excuse me. So, you know, from my perspective, it's really critical that we be different, that we think out of the box, and that we align ourselves with development interests that are able to think out of the box based upon their proven record. So with that, I also want to say that the private-public partnership is really, really critical. The private sector always has more money than what the public sector does, and how things end up getting financing, et cetera, is part of our development process that occurs later on. We have 14 members right now, and I think soon we may have a 15 member. 14 members are, of course, the township, and Sean is the primary coordinator with that. And of course, yourselves as the elected body and the appointed committee. And then there is Redstone. Redstone Architects has a very, very defined situation, and theirs is to develop the spatial needs, et cetera, associated with the core public spaces, such as your fire and police and those kinds of things. So that's a very specific thing. And then there is DLZ, which has been involved with surveying, with doing some engineering activity, and now involved with conceptual planning from the perspective of laying out a plan as one might see it if you were looking at it from above, for those who are not familiar. That doesn't mean we don't have a concept now and a plan, because we do. If you turn to the next page in here where it says development concept and evolution, yes, there is a concept. I'm going to go over that.
Howard, I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you want me to share my screen with your slideshow?
That would be great. That would be great,
And you can just tell me what you want me to do, and I'll
Okay, that's
move
great.
through it.
Do you know which page we're on?
Okay.
Go.
Page 2, is that what we're talking about?
Nope,
Is that
nope,
okay?
one more.
Sorry.
Actually, two more. Okay, so we have a concept, and it's a concept that has evolved over time for a variety of reasons. Number one, we were very fortunate enough to have obtained land to put into this civic center development, primarily and set aside for recreational purposes. It links us directly to the lake. It gives us a world of opportunity, and it really will set us apart from other civic centers, from other core areas of other communities. We did an extensive survey for those of you that may not be fully cognizant of, but over 600 households in your area responding to the survey, giving us a great deal of input about what they want to see, and more importantly, how they spend money, what kinds of recreational activity they're involved in, what types of activity they're involved in, what do they think of some of the resources that are available to them. We then did analytics that included of those survey results and much other, including what's happening with development processes and things like that. And then, of course, we added in some desire activity that some people want to see, that there isn't the data analytics to back it up, but it's very important. If we turn to the next page, Sean, that would be appreciated. So now I want to go through the process that we're responsible for coordinating. And this is a difficult process because technically we've got 2 other consultants and likely to be a 3rd one soon, okay, who are under contract to the township, but they also have to feed into us. And so there's a timing for that, and nothing has changed with respect to that timing. It's just taking us longer to get here because of our fear of not wanting to put something out when the development industry wouldn't have been ready for. But we have a step process, and it's a circle going counterclockwise here. And it started with the due diligence, which included all of that survey work, the analytics, and everything like that. And that was really, really critical. That took time. That was not impacted by anything else. But, you know, I think we got such a significant response, I think partially because of the virus that was going on and people were staying home. The developer database, we did extensive research internationally to come up with developers who meet certain criteria. Number one, you have the portfolio. Have they done projects that involves multiple activity like this thing is? Have they been involved in the development of public spaces? Have they been involved in the development of recreational spaces? Have they been involved in all of this type of activity, commercial, residential, mixed use activity, etc.? So we had to find the developers that was appropriate for, and then look, did they have the financial capacity to be able to work with us? And we came up with an extensive long list that we believe will be the developers from which we solicit. There are also a couple that will be added to that in the end when it can happen the day before we're ready to actually do the solicitation, because the solicitation is going to be done online. And that's just local people that have expressed interest to Sean and Rick and other people like that, so that we don't cut anybody out of the process, and that everybody gets an equal opportunity. Then we develop the marketing materials, and that's a 2-step process. The one that is critical and the real one that actually involves materials is the RFQ. We're going to talk about that for much of the rest of the presentation, but I want to go through some of these other steps. After we are about ready to solicit, we've held off on the solicitation because of the uncertainty in a lot of situations. And at the very end, I'm going to talk more about COVID and how it has impacted us. And the only thing I want to make you very sure and certain of, that interestingly enough, what we recommended, our recommendations in the beginning from the data and everything like that, they're actually better today than what they were at that time. They're stronger, okay? Because they're more in line with what has happened since. The actual solicitation is our next step in the process, at which time we will review the developers that come in and say, yes, they're interested. We're not asking them at this point in time to give us a specific proposal. We're just saying, are you interested in this project and willing to talk to us more? We then will review those proposals, or those qualifications. And let's say we end up saying, these look like the 3 or 4 best. And we will talk to those 3 or 4 people. After that, we will ask 2 or 3 or 1, depending upon our feelings of that part of the process, to submit a formal proposal to us. And there's things that we have to give them as part of that formal proposal process, which I'll talk about later. After that, we then decide on, if it's 1 or 2, we decide on who our choice is, and we select that entity, and we open up negotiations with them until we reach a final agreement for development. They could be involved in as little as just doing pieces of this thing, but they're the master developer. They're the overall master developer for the project. until they take over. I'm kind of the coordinator for the project. So if something has gone awry or there hasn't been the right kind of contact, blame me. Okay. As I said, we're in a complicated situation here, but please blame me, okay, for that process. But if you look, this graphic was done in the beginning of the process, and we called for various meetings that are you show in green with the committee and with the board, okay? And when you look at it, we're still at that point. Many of them occur later on because we're at the marketing materials, which is the RFQ process right now. Rick, if you'll, excuse me, Sean, if you'll turn to the next page. As I said earlier, one of the entities, that's Redstone, has a very specific responsibility. They're developing the concepts for the actual space, how things need to be located for the police and everybody else that's involved in that part of the process. So they're actually relatively long in the process. We know that they are the primary component of what we're doing, one of the major components of what we're doing, but they're fine where they are from a position standpoint, because that's what we turn over to the developer after we are in negotiations with 1, 2, or 3, or ask them for proposals. Next slide. We put together an RFQ. It's a request for qualification. I said it is not asking them for a proposal. That's for a couple of reasons. Number one, we want to see who's really out there. We don't want them to spend an enormous amount of time, because time is a lot of money. And when you put a proposal together, like we're going to be asking 1, 2, or 3 developers, you're talking thousands and sometimes $100,000 just for them to put the proposal together. Those who sit on the committee, who have worked from the architectural end and the design end of things, know that that's in fact true. So what we did, okay, and this graphic is from the cover of the draft of the RFQ. We took buildings and drawings that really existed largely in Michigan, in small communities throughout Michigan, and we took on the right side of your screen was the original drawing, and we converted them to sketches. Okay, because a sketch isn't permanent. It's a lot more, we don't know that the building is going to look like the one there. We don't know that at this point in time. Only thing we're saying is we know we've got a scale or 3 or 4 stories that are kind of the maximum that seems to fit with our community. It's kind of what's allowed under our regulatory process right now. We know that we want pedestrian activity very strongly through the area, and I'll talk about that more, but we want them to take our concepts and turn it into reality in partnership with us. Next. As I said, we were very lucky. We got a lot of land donated to us for recreational purposes. One of the key things is we want the recreation to be 365 days of the year. We have seniors in the community. We have others we have rain that occurs. We have things that happen, okay? And we know that we have seasons. So what's good in one season, for example, I'm not going to go cross-country skiing today, okay? But I could go cross-country skiing in the wintertime. So we know that there's a seasonal change that occurs out there, that there's lots of opportunities to do lots of things. And one of the things that I want you to keep in the back of your mind as you go forward, that includes with whomever you're going to hire, as our 5th team member here that's going to work on the recreation plan component of this thing, we want this thing to not be a fiscal drain on the township, period. Okay? So think about recreational activity from both the way something is laid out and from a programming standpoint that is at least revenue neutral. Open space and parks don't have to cost a community money. They can actually generate more money in some cases, but at least revenue neutral. So a good part of this recreation is going to be on that land that is outdoors. Next slide, please, Sean. But you also want indoors space, okay, so that people can walk if it's raining, if there's snow on the ground and they're not comfortable, if we've got seniors that want to go out as a group or individuals and walk, whatever the case may be, that they have a pleasant area that is not just, a track or something like that. It's a path. It's a path that is conjoined with our outdoor path system, that it's part of the same system, and that it's all one, and that it occurs indoors as well. Next slide. I'm not going to go into detail with the numbers about the number of units that are possible, because the number of units that are possible in your community exceeds what we can build on our land, and probably even the land around it. Okay. In a pattern that is different than what we have throughout most of the community right now, yet in compliance with much of what you have in your existing proposal from a height standpoint and density perspective. Okay. But the residential is a very strong and necessary component of this conjoined civic center, of this one area. Lifestyles are changing. As I said, we prepared this and we came up with these figures before COVID. And what's happened is, as you know, more and more people are working from home. Some of that will go back, but a whole lot of it's not going to go back. You're going to have a lot of people permanently working from home. Some of the biggest, even tech corporations in the country and financial corporations in the country have decided they're never going back. They're staying just the way they are now with people working from home. So it's a world that was evolving. I told our committee a while back that before COVID, 41% of all the new office space being built in the United States was being built in homes. So we've just accelerated that process. We haven't stopped it. It's not new. It was already happening before. Next slide. There's opportunity to expand, for the developer to expand be over and beyond the land that we have right now. We need to think about that as this thing evolves. We don't control it. Obviously, they'll have to be involved in the acquisition of that. But just understand that we can grow bigger if, in fact, we desire to do that, and if the early phases of this thing really take off. Next. Again, housing, we do not want to give them and say, oh, we want this material at this point in time, that material. When we ask for a formal proposal, and that's why DLZ is now working on some of the things they're working on. If the committee and the board and everybody decides that it has to be, I don't know, some kind of shingle, okay, then so be it. That's what we're going to ask the builder for. The developer can come back and say, how about this? And we may say, you know what, that's a good idea. We like that. And we may say, we really want 5 different kinds of things in there so that there's variables and change. So again, your drawings are not hard lines. They're intentionally, as I said, taken from real buildings and they're converted to sketches, because we want right now just for everything to be sketchy so that the developer isn't turned off by something they may see. Next. Some of the highlights that are really important is the residential ratings. We asked them what they thought of various things. And you need to look number 3 down here, okay, on the list. Shopping options to which I can walk. It's rated poor by 3/4 of the people in the community. White Lake's restaurant options at the time between fair or poor by the majority. Walking experiences that are safe and interesting, same thing. You got over 60% saying that. The availability of places that I can live, recreate, walk, and work at or near the same location came out again with, again, 3/4 or more saying that that's not, that they really don't feel that they have that option right now. We have an aging population, not just in White Lake, but across the country. We have a population both of young people and the baby boomers who are saying, we want to walk. We want to walk for our health. We like that kind of environment. And right now what people are saying, well, you're not offering us that. And remember that a lot of people in your community are or may move. And if we don't provide them through this Civic Center with the opportunity to stay in our community, they're going to go somewhere else. Next slide. From a commercial standpoint, our goal is to do twofold. I talked about the recreational change so that we've got winter, summer covered. We've got different things happening at different times of the year. We're not talking traditional commercial here. We've got two kinds of commercial that we're asking the developer, say, are you interested in this? One of them is a market. I'm not calling it a farmer's market. I'm just saying a market because it may be composed of farmers' activity certain times of year, holiday season bazaars during the Christmas season, other things going on, and it provides for entrepreneurial activity for young people who we also want to live in our community, as well as people who may be semi-retired or retired and want to do something else, as well as for communities that are around us and people who are in business there. So it provides ample opportunity for that and is not directly competing, but what it does is changes regularly. And with those changes, so if I was here in September, it's going to look different in October, and it's going to look different in December, which means I'm going to come back, whether if I'm a resident or I'm from outside of your area, I'm going to come back because I know it's going to be different. Next slide. Pop-up spaces, again, not traditional retail spaces like you think about, and that's why think of a pod versus a linear street versus linear activity. Think of a pod where this is going on, where if you only want to go to that, you can walk to it very easily from another. If you went and got services at the municipality, okay, you can do that because you're very close to it and right by. But if you only want to do this, you can do this. And the pop-up spaces, again, provide entrepreneurial stuff. And that's wonderful. And again, the change that is constant. So you want to come back to this Civic Center and this area constantly because it's going to be different. We've been fortunate enough to do a lot of work in the entertainment industry, and there's probably nobody, in spite of what's going on right now, and they're still doing fine. Disney probably does it better than anybody else. The secret that Disney does for Disney World, Disneyland, and the rest of the facilities around the globe is there's always something new. There's always change going on there. And they purposely do that because it makes you want to come back. That's what we're doing on a smaller scale. Next slide. Other components. These were mentioned by people. We don't know the feasibility of it, but you know, if we can develop some sort of, the developer feels that it's capable of developing some sort of education component, whether if that's for active adults, whether if it's for to get a associate, bachelor's degree, or continuing education, or advanced degrees, or whatever the case may be, or some sort of training. You know, we do not know, but certainly we can suggest that take a look at that when you end up in your final phase here. The same is true with medical. Medical is changing constantly, as we all know, and there's a lot of off-site campus activity that is going on with surgery centers and emergency services and everything like that. So, you know, the opportunity could exist for that as well. The one that I feel was weakest when it was suggested by somebody else that I put it in was what's called transient accommodation, hotel motel space. But in thinking about it, and if you look at the evolution of the homes that are rented out all over the place, Airbnb and the other entities that do that kind of thing, and you look at what's happening, and you look at the fact that we're creating a recreation center for 365 days a year. Sean's going on a trip next year, hopefully. I'm hoping to go up to Canada, do the same thing he's going to do. That got canceled from this year, and they won't let me in right now anyway. That, you know, to do some things outdoors, but maybe because we're not going to get a chain hotel because of our location, but maybe some kind of boutique situation that involves, at the same scale that we saw the housing, a quad or something like that, where 4 or 5 families can be there at one time for a week, staying there, enjoying the recreation, taking part in activities going on. If we have concerts and other activity in the recreation center, that maybe that's a possibility that is worth pursuing in the future as well. Next slide. Actually, I don't need my script sheet in front of me. I got it on the screen. When we started out this thing, some people said, you know, the seniors really need something here, and maybe we should have a senior center as part of our public sector entity, our public sector spaces. In doing the interviewing, again, that's why that's one of the reasons that survey was so important. In talking to your people, what we're finding out is they are participating in the last 2 years in, multiple kinds of activity outside the home. All kinds of it. You see the list there, and some of them are quite high. Okay, let it ring. I'm in the office. Any rate, there's all kinds of activity that they're doing right now, and to a large extent, it's a television station. Okay, large extent they have to go outside of your community to participate in these activities, but 55% are also exercising outside the home on a regular basis. Next slide. And what do they think of your current space? Again, that's important. They don't really feel we have anything to offer them at this point in time. So the ranking of indoor spaces for recreation, for special events, 74%, 3/4 fair to poor. Indoor spaces for meetings, somewhat better, but it's still over 50% is 60%, saying that it's not really good. Indoor spaces for culture and artistic activity, which you have lots of people that they're doing it. Again, the rate over 60% are saying not great. Indoor spaces for youth education training, arts and crafts, and those kind of things does better than some of the others. Indoor walking areas that are safe and comfortable and enjoyable views, it comes out actually, pretty bad from the poor perspective and a little bit better from the fair perspective. But again, people are saying we can really use this. So that's part of the evolution of the concept. And if we turn to the next slide, we also ask them, because it's important, do they have any kind of activity that is coming up in the foreseeable future, in the next couple years, that they have the planning responsibility for or are financially responsibility for? And you can see a list of events here, such as catered weddings, receptions, regular meetings, graduation parties, fundraisers, family school reunions. And this can be in that market space. This can be in other space. It is used for other purposes at other time. It can be in a community center kind of activity. The bottom line is we believe there's significant demand for this. There's significant demand for all the activities that are going on right now, so that we would have viability of that space almost 24/7, almost 365. Again, so that it is not a financial drain and burden on the community itself and on the government. Next slide. Let's go on one more. The conclusion from that was that we need a community center for all ages and not just for seniors. That we have this activity that can happen, is happening, going to happen whether or not we do something, but if we don't do something, it's going to happen outside our doors. And we don't gain our businesses, no one else gains the benefit from that. Next slide. Commonality, I can't stress. So we have a concept here. The concept is we've got our community services, we've got unique commercial, we've got housing that doesn't exist right now that's blended with work opportunities. We've got other services that can be involved. We've got our recreation. And I use the word conjoin because I want you to think about conjoined twins or something like that, where they're really tied to each other. There is no separation. It doesn't, but the separation is because it's physically the same. It's because it's so easy to get to one or the other. And I'm not suggesting that every building is mixed use. Don't get me wrong, that can add costs to things, but that they're close. We can go from one to the other all year long. And if it's outdoor walking areas or whatever it is, that it's pedestrian oriented throughout, and that it's linked by its character and it's linked by common things that are branding elements, such as arts and public places that are down at the lakefront, and they're also down, throughout the recreational area and in the commercial center, so that we have branded ourselves as something, okay? And that everybody knows that's what our brand is, and they're comfortable that we are one thing and one development. Next. Another thing that we think is important as part of that concept is that we use green technology. We're going in that direction anyway. One way or the other, we're moving quickly there, particularly with some of the things. A few years ago, I made a suggestion in Charlevoix, which some of you may know where it is and have been there, etc. And they have very serious problem with high-speed internet in their community. And I suggested, this was about 4 years ago now, I told them there was new technology that was coming that are little things that go on poles or on buildings right now that are outside, and they spread the wireless for a few blocks, and now they're being put all over the place. Okay. They questioned it at that point in time because it wasn't here yet, but it was coming. And that's part of so we know solar is going to be coming one way or the other. There are places that are put solar panels in, and some of your universities have tested it in sidewalks, etc., so that they never get ice on them. They're fine to walk. You put a canopy over top of some of them and you can be out there 24/7, 365. So we know we want the green technology as a component as well of this concept. Yes, go on, please. So back to how things end up fitting in here and where. Right now we have Redstone, which I told you, they'll finish their job. We just turn that over directly to the developer, okay, or developers, either in the proposal phase or when we lock in on one. Either way, okay? So that's of no concern whatsoever. DLZ right now is working on conceptual plans that you see that are more, that the average person interprets as a conceptual plan, but I said we already have a plan here, and it is those pods, those nodes with these various components that are the land use components of this thing. And what they're preparing is drawings, okay, from the plan view, if you were up in space and looking down at something, or from the side view of, well, this is what we think we would like the buildings to look like. That won't be fed into the developer till after we're in that, either asking them for proposals, or we have gotten proposals for them. In all probability, it's going to be when we ask them for proposals. Next. The last component of the RFQ is one I hate, but it's also to protect you and me and everybody else, and that's the legal disclaimers. It's written by attorneys. We've used it before, and it says, this is good. Any money you spend is yours. We have no responsibility for that. I believe that is the last slide. Yes, this is important. We've held up now because of COVID, okay, to be honest with you. The long-term, and there are different impacts on the COVID's had on the economy. Number one, I don't believe it's had any long-term impact on the economy. Okay, I do believe that there are short-term issues that we will go through. We are going through. I don't believe fundamentally, people keep talking about the new norm. No, there is no new norm. The norm is the norm. We will get back there. There will be things that will be different, but they were happening anyway. And so the long-term impact is not there. It's fine. It does have an impact on component pieces, and largely it sped some things up that were happening anyway. I can tell you that you can go back and find articles on the major stores in this country, some of whom have declared bankruptcy, and major restaurant chains who have declared bankruptcy in the last 2 months who have blamed the virus for their bankruptcy. And you can go back 2, 3, 4 years and find articles saying how they were in trouble. I think Mike will attest to the fact residential market doesn't seem to have been impacted at all. People are busy. There's houses selling, just as well as they were before, if not better. So it has had some impact on component pieces, but not what is being played up to have had. And I'm not making a political statement here. It's just, in my opinion, factual. Our probability of success, I think it has increased our probability of success, because everything that we have suggested is the way the world was moving anyway, which is the reason why we suggested it. And in some cases, it's just sped it up. Traditional commercial was having difficulties before this. The kind of things we're talking about are a little bit harder to pull off. They take a little bit more sensitivity to the individual business owner, but that's where things were going, and that changing. It has impacted our timing. That's why we're here now instead of 2 months earlier. That's why, I'm suggesting now that we do not release the RFQ until we have to release it early enough so that when you go to the voters, that you get the ability to float bonds, whether or not you need to do that and things like that, that you have the ability to have your financing in place should you need to have all of that. Okay. But that I think the timing now is we're not going to wait till after the election. I just want to see how the school situation lays out for the first couple weeks in September, and we shoot for October for distributing the RFQ to begin getting responses from the developers, the initial responses. Now I think we're done with the presentation.
Hey, well, thank you, Howard. I certainly appreciate all the information. And for some of the board members, so this was new. For many of the Civic Center Development Committee members, there's a lot of this that was talked about in different ways and hashed out. It's just a lot of information and a lengthy process to go through.
Did you lose me?
Nope, you're still there.
Because I can't see you. So, okay.
Well,
Wait a minute. Something popped my Zoom from I know what from my computer, the regular Zoom popped up. Okay, go.
You're still there.
Okay.
So, but I would at this time, if there's always going to be an ongoing plethora of questions and things that's going to continue, but is there any specific item that anybody wants to touch on? In particular, I'll ask the board members at this time, if there's something that you'd like to ask, if you just kind of raise your hand there and we'll kind of go from there. It's a lot of information to digest. Mr. Powell, I saw your hand go up and go down.
Shoot, Mike.
Yes, all right. And I certainly noticed that Mike Roman raised his hand as well. So I just got a couple questions for you, Howard, that might help us in making some decisions here that we're going to be making shortly. First of all, I think it's very important for the board to know and the committee to know that how important the private-public partnership is going to be. We have land that we're going to be putting up, but really we're really going to need to depend on the expertise of the developers as to how to build the buildings, how to put the uses together, and how to market the uses and market the spaces and things like that. We are not experts at that. The developer is, and he's going to be putting his own money up. And so I can't stress how important it is to make sure that that private developer is of a good quality and a good standing. Hence the requirement for the RFQ. I guess I have a question for you, because the board's going to have a decision to make here after your presentation, and that's to authorize DLZ to do a more detailed plan of the area. And as you know, we already have one that we paid for a couple of years ago, and then we have a conceptual plan layout now. And my concern is that we present a developer with such a detailed plan that it takes their discretion away, and it might even hinder them from wanting to work with us. And so I'd like your guidance a little bit on what detail might detract from our land versus enhance it.
Mike, I think I look at that part of it differently than perhaps you just presented it. At some point, we need to be able to, we're going to say to one developer or multiple developers, depending upon when we ask them for it, we're going to say, look, here's what we think. We don't know if that works for you, but here's what we think. Tell us. So, but we have to have something to throw out to them that says, from a physical design perspective, this is what we think, but we're not locked in. Okay. And I think that's the important difference. We're not locked into that. We just believe, we're trying to get our ideas so that you can understand them in the way you're typically used to dealing with them. Okay. On formal paper. So that's the way I would read that. And that's an important part of the process at some point. And but no, I don't think we get down to the level of saying, oh, we should use terracotta, whatever, or anything like that in this process. Just, keep that open for us. But I do think it's important that we say to them, here's a concept that we kind of like, we're not locked into it.
And isn't that something we already possess?
Who asked that question? John?
Yeah, isn't that something we already possess? I mean, we have a conceptual drawing of what we want, right? An idea.
Well, let me interject here for a minute. At this point, we had a basic plan that was put together that was part of the Elizabeth Lake Road study that the Oakland, not study, but review that Oakland County Road Commission wanted to have, that we put together something that was very block diagrammed. It didn't go into any real details, nor did it have any elevations or anything of that sort. And as we looked at this, and a number of the developers that I've spoken with, I spoke with another one today, and I know Sean has spoken to a number of them, have all said, get your needs. And this is what we started when we started this out, was one of the things that we've tried to do is figure out to put the township's needs, the needs of public safety building and the needs of the township town hall, try to get some kind of an idea of the direction you want to go in there and what percentage or what area of land use you're going to use. We've never really gotten that defined in it. And now as the public safety building is starting to take form, and potentially we're hopefully going to see some sort of, again, concept. These are concept drawings. You have to start with something that will come out and we can show conceptually placement. And when we started all this, we didn't have the park. So
That's
now
it's
a key element that's been added in that changes all the dynamics from any of the original ideas. So now we're trying to figure out the best way to access the park with having the other potential buildings maybe in that potential proximity, and to at least give some direction. And this is what I've been requested, again, by multiple developers, is give us an idea of what you want, where and how you want to get started. And if you're not married to it, which we're not, it's ink on paper, and that we can embellish it or confirm it or try to make it what will work best and dovetail into the rest of the development. None of them have wanted me to come empty-handed, so to speak. They've all wanted some basic needs of the township put first, because otherwise it's just a guessing game. As one of the developers told me today, he said, it's like coming home and going out to dinner with your wife. You start there. Well, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know, honey. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know, honey. Where do you want to go to dinner? And after a while, you throw a pizza in the oven. So, that's the kind of thing. They like to have some direction, because as Howard said, they're going to make a financial commitment when they bite into this, just in plan and CAD work and time to sit down to be able to put something together to present to the township board.
And Rick, let me also add to that. Yeah, I mean, so many people, I talked about the evolution of the concept that we have right now. We didn't have the park space the last time that work was done. We didn't have the idea of a community spaces. We didn't have the idea of the pop-up and other commercial spaces. We didn't know that there would be opportunities for residential and for people to live in the residential and also work in that residential. All that's brand new. That didn't exist when those last plans were done.
So it's been the evolution of the process. So it would be I believe in the township's best interest. And again, by request of everyone that I've spoken with and Sean has, and some of them are local, people that have a financial stake in Oakland County and some right here in White Lake, have all said, get your needs in order, and then we'll be more than happy to, interject and embellish or change or whatever it is. But we need to have some direction going forward. And Sean, you care to comment on that?
I think you covered it pretty well. And we kind of touched on park planning, and Howard and I had a discussion earlier this week, or maybe it was the end of last week, about, and not to get off the beaten path, but when we decide to move ahead, when the board decides to move ahead with a firm to do the master planning, which will allow us to seek future grants for development of the park, that firm would need to be brought into this process as well. So, again, there aren't any seams. So everybody's kind of working toward the same goal, focusing on their different objectives, but, singing from the same sheet of music.
And it's going to take a concerted effort. Yes, Mr. Roman.
Rick, I hope I didn't cut you off.
Nope, you're good.
Howard, I just want to kind of explain how I envision what we're going to get from DLZ in this concept design, and you can either confirm my thought or correct me. But if you kind of stood on the site that we have and walked across Elizabeth Lake Road and elevated yourself about 200 feet up and took a picture at the site with buildings, sidewalks, grass, parking, roads, everything included in sketch form, that's kind of what I'm envisioning. Am I on the right track?
I think you're on the right track. It's sketch, but it's a sketch is the key word there.
Okay. So I know, Eric, you had kind of sent Sean some slides on a similar project. I don't remember seeing an entire site concept, but am I correct in my understanding that that's what we're going to get now? We're going to get now, Eric, you're going to have a concept photo or sketch of the entire site.
Mike, let me interject here real quick.
Yep.
I think what we're really trying to do, and again, I said this before, is we're really trying to kind of get the needs of the township. This is the area that we're trying to put in and create that particular end of it. That's where this is really probably the most of the energies is going to go, is to kind of get what the township needs. And it may take it to a point where we have an idea what's going to go over here at the intersection, but we don't necessarily have that plan laid out, because that creates a need that we have, which is what I've been requested by many developers again. And it allows them to look at the rest of the canvas. What is it that they want to plant on that canvas? So it's kind of a marriage of a variety of different things. So that end of it to the other side, we're not going to show them where they're going to build a store or any facility of the sort. The thing that we're concerned with right now, and what the scope of this work entails, is the township hall location. And as you said, from 200 feet up, you'll be able to have an idea of how the public safety building interacts with Elizabeth Lake Road, how you access the park, how you access the site for the township hall. And then what's left from there out, some of the mechanics, basic mechanics of it would be done, but it isn't going to go into a full nuts and bolts of everything, because again, that's the area that we want people to come in and be creative with. So this is kind of where this is. Eric, if I've missed something, let me know, but that's what we kind of talked about.
Yeah, Rick, I understood Howard a little differently. I thought even though some of the other development on that site is theoretical, that it would still be included in the concept?
Well, okay, you know that you have right now, or you potentially have another component being added into it because we got the park, okay, space, and that there's going to be work done on that component of it. So it's almost like, again, I use the expression pods. It's almost like if I had a drawing where, I drew circles on it. And so one of these circles, because the problem I'm having and probably the difference that you're hearing here is the term site. Okay. To me, when I think of site, it's the whole thing. Okay. It's the big picture. It's that entire concept. And I think, Rick, what you're talking more about is the site dealing with the public services, et cetera, more than anything else. Is that correct?
More so what we need to focus on more of how we're going to be able to utilize the facilities we have, potential locations for the building, exactly how that sits. That's what this is really more about, trying to get that hammered out. We're not going to tell people how they're going to build whatever building or potentially they're going to do. We'll know where the roundabout's going to be. Potentially we'll know where a loop road could be, but it's not going to be fully engineered. It wouldn't make sense to do that because that road could very easily be relocated for whatever purposes, for whatever development comes along. So that wouldn't be money well spent. But you still have to give them some kind of general parameters, but you don't have to go into the macro on it. We'll do a little more of that on the public services end of it. Again, the public safety building and the township hall and the park. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Rick, respectfully, I'm hearing two different things from you and Howard. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Howard, but I thought you were looking in this concept design of more of a built out site. And even if we put apartments and mixed use in there, a developer will know that could change. But at least you've got an entire site sketched.
Okay, and that's the difference is the use of the word site. That's what I said before, Mike. I'm using the term site in terms of the whole recreation area, all the space that's around it, et cetera. And what Rick's saying is this work is associated with the public space, the public service space that's associated with the facilities that you're building, and that's what's going to be defined through the process that DLC is going to work on.
So can I clarify a little bit here? So our original task was limited to the town hall building, the town hall program, developing a concept for that. What we're talking about adding is the concept of the overall master plan. We're using the word site, but think of it as the overall master plan for the whole development. So that's the piece that we're talking about now. And again, just concept level, just to give people, like Howard said, to give people an idea, some ideas of what it could be, not to necessarily define what it has to be. We recently did a private-public partnership for a developer where we're in a similar role. I can share on the screen here what I'm going to describe, but we designed the public components to a much higher level of detail based on what the municipality needed in that project, and said, okay, developer, these are the minimum requirements for the public services for that building. And then we just gave a very loose, outline of what the space available for the commercial development in this other project. And I can just share my screen real quick. The style is completely different. The use is completely different, but I just want to use it as an example. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So this this part here that is more developed out is for the public use. This was actually a transit station for a large city, a public terminal. And then this building, you know, in this whole area, it doesn't have to be a high rise. They talked about a hospital or a mall or whatever. It could be anything. Whatever the developer wanted to use this site for was up to them, as long as they provided the minimum requirements for this public agency, which was the transit center and all the ancillary buildings you see, you know. So this was an overall kind of bird's eye view snapshot of, and the final presentation was had labels and everything on to describe what it was. This was just something I pulled up out of my email quick, but you know, so that sort of product give a bird's eye view of what it could be. And then they got developer, you know, proposals from multiple developers and ended up building the commercial development was something, you know, looked completely different than that. But that's the idea, just to set the parameters for what the public agency needs to get out of the public side, right? And the private development can be something, you know, whatever everybody agrees to in their proposal. But, so that's just one example of where we've done this before with the similar delivery method and played a similar role. And yeah, this thing is under construction now, but so it looks quite a bit different than that.
Yeah, so thank you, Eric. But that's kind of where I'm kind of going, Mike. It'll show what we need. It might show some what I'll call phantom buildings or other things on the site, but not anything specific that could potentially be done by private sector, because again, it could be something we just throw in there, but it may be completely different from what a developer might want to do.
Okay. So Rick, I certainly want to move this process forward. I'm in favor of that. But what I would like to ask, Eric, before you complete this, if you can just keep Howard in the loop, because Howard, you're the one that's going to take this and use it, you know, to market us. So if you guys can just please continue to work together.
Yeah. So, and these renderings that we started to put together certainly are not finalized. I mean, obviously, we expected to get some comments from Howard and from everybody else and make adjustments to these. This was just a first pass. I don't know if everybody's even seen these, but I can share.
No, we haven't put it together because it wasn't these drawings here. No, we were trying to get some of this stuff out there, but what I was hoping to have was, before this was out to the board, before we had our meeting, and of course COVID stalled a lot of stuff, was to have again, that little area that be more specific, showing where, okay, this is kind of where the township offices would go. And then the rest of this stuff these are the concept ideas that potentially could be in the rest of the area. And again, it may not be that specific style, it may not be that specific material. This is just to plant a seed. And when we did show this to the members of the Civic Center Development Committee, I think we were heading in, you know, everyone there, the cross section, I think everybody felt it was kind of heading in the right direction to kind of at least give the idea. And again, the cake wasn't quite baked yet to bring out and really kind of get more into it, because the one key part is, if someone asked me tomorrow, well, what's it look like where the Township Hall and the Public Safety Building go? My answer is, I can't tell you that, because this is the next step of the work that I need to get approval on, so that we can establish that, and then we can move forward from there. So that's the one segment of it, another segment of it that's important that we need to get accomplished. And that's pretty much on that end of it. Anyone else with a question?
Yeah.
Who's got their hand up? Oh, Scott, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Didn't DLZ already do a needs assessment and space requirements for the town hall and et cetera, et cetera?
We're still developing that. That's still being developed.
I see it presented in the proposal we're voting on tonight for another 10,000. So that's just a continuation of, is that expense already taking place? Or are we paying for it again?
That already happened, Scott. There's kind of a mix in the, sorry for jumping in here, in the exhibits, but that would have been on, it was a previous phase. It was like maybe the first big phase.
So that won't be included in the finances that we're approving tonight, or will it? Do we need to do another one?
I believe that was already approved in 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. All right. I'm just looking through these exhibits on what we're checking out tonight. And I saw that popped up, so I want to make sure, but
But I think that was included as a reference to the original agreement that we had regarding the Civic Center plan programming. Just as an example, because we're just talking about the contract amendment so that we can include some of this other bigger site type stuff that we're talking about.
okay. I just really hate to see us take it too far and do some stuff that really isn't needed to be done, that maybe a private unit's going to come in and change and do their own way anyhow. So I guess I wouldn't know where to stop and start, but you know, if we need to spend the money to move this forward, I'd like to do it as, you know, conservatively as possible. So I guess that would be up to the professionals here.
Trustee Smith had her hand up, I think.
Liz?
Liz, did you?
I did. Thank
Raise
you.
your hand up.
So I agree with Trustee Powell and Trustee Ruggles. I kind of think that we're going down a path that could become completely irrelevant and we're spending unnecessary funds. What I would like to see is more of what Supervisor Colwell is talking about, is really honing in on our public safety and township needs first. This board has not had a hearty discussion on our needs. And so I really think that we need to talk about that, reserve our space. And I know we've touched on that to make sure that the township has what we need, but I'd really like to hone in on that, talk about that more, so that we're all on the same page, that the public safety building and the township building is what we need and desire. And then what's left would be out to hopefully very unique developers. I'm looking for a very interesting, usable space for our residents. So I kind of think we're going down the path a little bit too far. We need to, just my opinion, we need to all be on the same page and talk about what the township needs are first. I don't think we're in any rush for the RFQ, and then kind of go from there. I think like the two-step process or piecemeal it. I agree that we could spend this money and go down the path that our future partner, it doesn't gel, and then that's irrelevant. So those are my thoughts. I'd like to take care of the township and the public safety building first, and then go.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. And that's my objective, to get those two. And that's the point I've been trying to make here, is that's what is the main focus is. There may be some overdraft that shows other people what we potentially would do. If your developer looks at something and says, well, are you going to only allow a single story, or maybe we allow 2 or 3? We're not talking a lot of the expenditure being on what I'll call the outlot areas. The most of the focus is going to be, like you had mentioned, Liz, it'll be really more on what we need for White Lake Township first. And that's what really this expenditure, the primary focus of this is.
Right, but we still haven't seen the outcome of the needs and assessment yet. So I just think we're kind of,
the needs and assessment has been pretty much collaborated for the public safety building, and we're getting it wrapped up on the Civic Center building. And it would be nice.
That needs to come back to this board first.
Oh, yeah,
so that we know what it is that we're actually, what kind of space we have to work with, and what's
once we get to that point and we have some sort of a rendering, then we'll do that. But that's what we're trying to get this finished up so that we have something to put together. The day-to-day operations, have been looked at by all the department heads and will be continue to be reviewed by department heads, just like it was with Chief Keller and Chief Marinucci. They've looked at the building that suits their needs for public safety. And
Right,
they know
and I trust their opinion. That's the least of my worries in the process. But, you know, I think
as the interior of the building and the physical needs of the township function day to day, as the clerk and the trustees, the clerk and the treasurer and the sort of those people have their functions in the planning department, water, things of that nature. These are the people that are really putting and working with DLZ, trying to get this plan put together of what this building looks like. So they're the ones that are going to be the ones that are going to dictate its function, how it.
right. I'm aware of that, but
Well, that's what we're doing. That's what part of this process is, Liz.
so I guess the presentation this evening was not what I anticipated or expected. It really didn't give me the information that I'm looking for. And I'm not real fond of the thought process of, well, we'll just kind of have this rendering and maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't. I mean, that's just really throwing money out the window. So that's where I'm at. And I'd like to hear from my other colleagues.
Any other comments from any of the members? Mr. Lilly. Mr. Lilly.
Rick, I'd like to back up just a little bit, maybe a little bit pre this committee here, but you know, we did a similar thing with the Township Hall that we had hired an architect to look at space needs. And we all agree that the present Township Hall is not sufficient to meet all of our needs. And after we looked at the present building, we found that I think it was about $1.7 million to just bring the building up to code. And we still had to decide what the needs of all of the departments were. And we proceeded with that. And I think we had the physical proof to show that to the residents of this community, it was not worth putting one penny into this building for future needs. And then we formed this committee here to look at the public safety, the Township Hall, the senior center, and then we purchased the park property shortly after this process began. And I think it's important to proceed with this in the aspect that one is what are our needs, and number two is what is it going to cost. I think we have come to somewhat of an area where we have agreed that what the needs of police and fire are, what the needs of the Township Hall and the needs of the senior center are. And now we're at the point of how much is those three facilities going to cost us? And I think we all know that probably from perceived expense of just those three is quite a burden for the people of this township to handle. And why I was in favor of proceeding with this public-private partnership to at least explore is to see if we can't get the cost of the township facilities down and allow a developer to come in and to do a certain portion of that and then be able to look at our costs. Are residents going to pay all the costs, or is there some large savings that are potential? And I think we're at that point now when we talk about the RFQ that township needs to proceed forward to put at least a concept out to see what the great activity of the developer are going to be. And I agree that we don't need to be too specific with this plan. And maybe it is a little over aggressive, but I think we're going to be able to look at what a potential bidder on this project can do for us as far as their own rearrangement, their own ideas and thoughts. And, you know, at this point, we're at a $19,000 bill for J&A. And as I understand it, part of the work has already been completed on that. And I understand that, you know, from the very beginning that they didn't really realize that the money included the design or the placement of other buildings as well as the township. So I'm in somewhat of agreement that we need to move forward the RFQ to really nail down what Howard's trying to get at, that costs are going to be a huge determining factor of whether this township is able to move forward or not. And I'm kind of interested to see what the results of this public-private partnership will be.
You're breaking up a little
I'd like
bit.
to also thank the committee for all of the work that they've done to get it to this point. And I don't think there's been anything kept from everybody. That time is not a huge factor at this point, but we need to get it out to these developers to see what the creativity they have to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. Okay, any other board members? Mr. Powell.
Yes, and I really appreciate the board members and their input, and I did not want to necessarily derail the first part of our agenda tonight, and I'd like to maybe steer back just a little bit. And I did ask Howard a question to be able to understand how we might deal with the second part of the agenda. So I have one additional question, and I think we ought to stick with the first part of the agenda, which is the presentation and how the overall concept of the site and how we're going to move forward might continue. Just to make sure that everyone understands where I'm coming from, and I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, but my firm is doing the design layout for a major water park here in Oakland County. And it's going to be south of us. And that water park then is going to take up a vast majority of a piece of property, but then the ancillary uses are going to be commercial, industrial, and residential around the water park. And so we've been asked to do an overall design of the area, exactly what Howard's talking about, and quite frankly, approximately what Eric and Michael at DLZ are talking about. However, we're not doing such a detailed view because those areas are going to be given to the developers that are interested in that portion of the site. Then they're experts, and quite frankly, they far exceed all of us in their expertise on how to develop their portion of the property. So I'm saying that as part of the lead in into the next phase, but in my next question to Howard, Howard, do we have a plan view of the site and the overall project, the master plan for the overall property? Do we have a plan that you would feel comfortable presenting or providing the potential developers for the RFQs? Or do we need to do more detail, possibly not as detailed as DLZ is proposing, JNAL DLZ is proposing, but do we have a plan right now that you would feel satisfied presenting to the potential private partner?
In our RFQ, here's how I handled that, Mike. In our RFQ, I put in some comments about the public space and the public activity, et cetera. And afterwards I said, and more information is available, we can make more information available to you. At some point, when we've sent the RFQ out, developers are going to come back and say, can we have more information? At that point in time, we need what you're asking for. And that's why I think it's critical that we continue to move forward with DLZ, that you move forward with what you're proposing to do with the park space and stuff like that, because then we do have something we can say to them in a conceptual basis. This is where we are overall.
Okay, the reason I asked that, of course, the next part of this meeting tonight is DLZ is asking the township board to approve a $20,000 additional part of a contract. And I'm not necessarily convinced that it would take that much effort to provide you what you need to present for future information to a private partner.
That's, I can't answer that question.
You're just talking about road layouts.
Road layouts and pads for buildings, yeah.
Yeah.
More to it. There's more to it than that. I mean,
Is there?
yeah, there's gonna, you have to have a certain amount of knowledge.
But where is it?
This together. This is what this has to be done. That's why we need to have the expenditure so we can go to the next phase and get these drawings generated in their entirety that'll reflect this information. So where is it? It's waiting for them to do the work. And that's why we need to move forward. This is just a natural progression of steps when you do developments like this. I know it seems like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but in order to move forward, you're going to need to make investments in planning and design. And these are just that. You wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. You wouldn't put the house on the lot without having the engineer come out and survey it. And you wouldn't have the engineer have the engineer build you in a low spot. So there are all the different steps that go along the way, and Mr. Powell knows I'm right, that you need to do to get where you need to go. We need to have some sort of a more defined drawing that will show potentially access to the park so that we can start to bring that up and how that'll meld with the township, civic center building, as well as the public safety building. And that particular area is I think is really what the focus is here. Scott?
Do the rest of you have the results from the first expenditure of money from the first assignment, we'll call it, the assessments and the site analysis? Has that been presented to anybody? Or are we still waiting for that?
We have some.
Sorry,
there was a bunch of feedback there. Some of that has been put together for the site, and some of it's been put together for the building. We've worked on some of the needs assessment for the new township hall and have started to work out some basic floor spatial planning. There's no issue with that. It's nothing that's, solid, but it would be nice to be able to get some conceptuals of what the outside of the building could look like so that we could have a potential idea, just like the public safety building has a concept of the outside and some concepts of its space that was done by Redstone. So this is all kind of a marriage of all this that comes together. And this again shows where the two properties, there's so many pieces of this puzzle right now that need to be defined, and in particular, the access to the park. And that's what, again, wasn't there in the very beginning. If you remember originally when we first did a throw out sketch there to the county, we showed a boomerang shaped building that was dead center on Civic Center Drive. In other words, where the roundabout would be. Since then, this has evolved, and the building doesn't need to be the size that it was originally proposed because its needs are going to be different. If you remember when that was first conceived, that was a thought of potentially having the library being a co-tenant with us. And Mr. Powell, and I see you're nodding your head, so you remember all those conversations. Well, we didn't go down that road, and now that particular layout, it probably makes more sense not to have it in that location. And why would you not take and nest it closer to the other buildings so that it gives us a greater versatility in the rest of the space? Again, so if a developer comes in and looks at it, they don't sit there and say, well, this is now a thumbtack in the middle of where we want to do something. Why do you have that there? Well, it just doesn't make sense. So if we put things in an area that are more connective to each other, it makes it easier for people to get around and mobility and things of that sort. It also allows us to be a very good guardian of the park because the entryway to the park will be hopefully located on that niche somewhere. I'm not quite sure where that's going to fall out yet. That's going to be our fifth dance partner. That's going to be the person that's going to help us develop the park. So these are still some things that we are still going to come into focus, and it's going to take time and money to get there. Andrea, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's a concept, and thank you, Supervisor Kowal. I like the idea, and I agree with everyone else that we need to continue on forward. I do realize it's an expensive step, but it's part of the process, like you were saying.
Thank you. Any other questions
Yep.
at this time?
I'd just like to hear what the rest of the committee members think.
We're going to get to them right now. I see Mr. Christopher, you were there a moment ago. Thought I saw. No? Okay. Mr. Roman.
I want to make sure I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So, to everyone, none of us have been through this process before. This is new to all of us. And because we are all fiscally responsible, gosh, it just seems like every other day we got to spend more money on this. Unfortunately, that's what this process is going to take. I think we're all realizing as we go that the planning of this process is going to cost us more than we probably thought. I am putting my trust in Howard. Howard has done this before. This is the process that Howard wants us to follow. And this concept design is the next step. Eric, if you could maybe just take a minute and explain a little bit to the board and the committee as to the time that you will need in order to complete the site analysis and concept design, I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, sure. We'll need to take some time to develop the site plan base drawing, get some ideas together, and then meet again with with Sean and Rick or whoever's going to be in that, just to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what we want to show, again with Howard, and get some feedback on what's been put together so far, to make sure that the uses that we're going to identify on the plan or make sense or congruent with what Howard is thinking there. And then so that process will take a few weeks. Then we'll come with a draft, right? And then get some more feedback. And then a few more weeks, we'll have sort of a final deliverable that would be available whenever the time is right to share that with potential developers. We are getting very close on the town hall, I want to say. It's been on hold for a little bit because we're waiting until some of this other overall master plan gets worked out, because there's some of the feedback with the community center and recreational center that could be in a different building or part of the same building. Some of that is part of the overall master planning, right? So we can't finalize the program for the town hall until this next step is underway, at least to a certain point, because some of those uses, would be up in the air a little bit if they go in the same building or in a separate building.
Eric, is it possible that in a few weeks you can get to the next level and that perhaps you can come back to the trustees? I think that would, make everybody happy, that they'd know where you were and, what was left at that point in time, so that they could have their input then, so that we could finalize things very quickly after that.
Sure, yeah.
And Howard, at that point, could we then get really into the RFQ and finalize it all at that same
Sure.
time, and then be able to
Sure.
say that we're putting a stamp on everything and ship it out?
Sure.
That gives some people some time to look at it some more and provide you with any questions they may have, or us with any input they may have.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you, Howard. This is pretty much concludes, I think, the end of the presentation of how Howard has been progressing with this, and there's been the brief review of the draft RFQ. Sean, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't. Howard and I have been in discussions on kind of the RFQ and how that process might go. Some of the questions I have for him, I can talk to him on offline about. I just don't know if there's anything else that the group, the board, or the committee might need or want to see at any point between now and possibly the next meeting Howard's suggesting, which would be a meeting where we maybe wrap everything up and submit it.
Okay,
When I say submit it, I guess I should say, send it out to see what kind of feedback we get.
right. See what kind of feedback we get. And it'd be good for everybody to look at it and have another meeting and have a go and see where the thought processes is, especially if we can see how it's going to, again, dovetail in with the park and things of that nature, that it'll kind of give everybody like a snapshot of that particular area. And the balance of it could be up to an individual developer or a group of developers, whoever comes in, and they have an idea how they want to paint the canvas. And they potentially could come back to us and say, hey, you did this, but this might work better, and this will work better with what our thought process is. And, and there may be other direction, but in the meantime, we are at least giving what is being asked for, and what is being asked for by developers that we've spoken with so far, and just a few that we have not even solicited. People are just finding out about this and starting to come to us. Is, get what you think you guys need sort of set up and kind of get that going, and then we'll see where this evolves.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think it's important to just say again that the RFQ, we're testing the waters. We're seeing who's interested, and we're providing them with some concepts and ideas. So we're kind of framing that discussion. So when we do progress to the next level and we do start potentially interviewing firms, there are no surprises, and they may want some changes, we may want some changes. It's sort of a negotiation. I mean, we own the property, we're in control of how this is going to go. So while an RFQ may go out the door and we may release some kind of ballpark ideas, let's say the uses, the configuration, the architecture, we're not going to lose control of that. We're going to retain control of that as a part of this process, so it looks like and functions like we want it to. And I think that that's important for all of us to remember, and for the community to be aware of too. We're not ceding control of any of this. We are in the driver's seat. We want to stay there. And, it may be a bit of a fluid process at first.
Sean, that's why we've chosen this particular process, so that we do maintain control throughout the entire process.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And are there any of the Civic Center Development Committee members that would like to say anything? I don't have all your screens, so I can't see all your hands simultaneously, so I have to scroll. Oh, Murray, no. Chief? Dan? No. John? Okay. Anthony?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's down here. I've got screens popping up all over the place here. Okay, well, we got quite a few there. Okay. And Jim, Mr. Christopher, you're good? Okay. All right. Well, Howard, I want to thank you very much for the update and the detail that you went into on it, and kind of explaining that process that the Civic Center Development Committee has been going through this exercise. And with that, I say thank you very much. And we are now going to move on to item 7, which is the request to approve a proposal for a Civic Center Development Committee project for DLZ. Sean, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't. This was at the last meeting, this was discussed, and some of the exhibits were not included at that time. You'll have a memo from Nathan, who it looks like he's still on, dated August 19th. And, Eric's kind of touched on some of the contents of what we can expect with the next phase or the amendment. And so if you have any questions, I would probably steer them to Eric and Nathan at this point. But the exhibit drawings are attached that were not attached the last time. So if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to try to answer them, or Eric and Nathan may be really the more appropriate parties to ask.
Okay. Any questions for the architectural firm at this time? Very good. Okay. Any questions in general on any of the rest of this? We've kind of talked most of it through, intertwined with the first section of this. So if there's anything else that anyone wants to touch base on, Mr. Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. You represented what needs to happen on a site very eloquently regarding the engineering, the placement, the architecture. You missed out quite frankly, the most important aspect is you have to have an owner first. And quite frankly, we don't have an owner on the balance of the property. We have the township. So the need to design and come up with the concept for our needs as part of that owner, that we need that space, is of utmost importance. And so you're absolutely correct with that. We are going to be the owner of portion of that. And so therefore, I certainly, as one board member, would very much like to have an update as to what DLZ has come up with for space utilization and concept, because we as a board may not agree with their conclusions, or we'd like to have some say in that. How much are they going to take? Are they proposing that we take 10 acres, 15 acres, 2 acres? I have no concept. And so I'd certainly like to be aware of that. And then I believe that Howard's presentation was eloquent enough that that we need some kind of a master plan for the overall site, but possibly not the detail of renderings and visualization and SketchUp and building materials and all that kind of stuff. And so my suggestion to the board would be to, if you go down to Exhibit B in this proposal from J&A, Exhibit B kind of divides it out. We have a Civic Center master plan concept development for $9,000. I'm assuming that is for the whole Civic Center, the master plan for the entire site, in plan view, addressing how the township needs are going to be placed on there and what land is available, and then a concept master plan, but not getting into the details of a rendering of a building or the rendering of site, things like that. I think that is way premature. And so I would either be in favor of just approving the $9,000 or having DLZ go back and reevaluate their proposal based upon this meeting tonight. If you go back and evaluate the amount of money that we spent just on the original design or area use back in the original, and I forget who did it a couple of years ago, and then all the money we spent thus far, I'll bet you Michael Roman would come up with over $100,000 or approaching $100,000 just in planning. And I believe that, quite frankly, we could get what Howard's looking for and what I would be looking for in the $9,000 Civic Center Master Plan Concept Development Plan. Then we can decide as a group, and with Howard's help and the committee, we can decide, do we really need building elevations and profiles and renderings and materials and colors and all that stuff? Maybe we don't need that $10,500 part of their proposal. That's, I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you. Okay, well, that being said, I will go out there and I will solicit a motion to approve the amended scope of services for $19,500 to include the Civic Center Master Planning Concept Development and Civic Center Graphic Visualization Renderings, not to exceed $19,500. And I'm making that in the form of a motion. Looking for support.
Can we have discussion first? Is anybody willing to consider Mr. Powell's suggestion?
I am.
I am too.
Well, still putting it out there for a motion and support.
I will support it, but I have a question as well.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm a little confused. On Exhibit A, there is a site analysis and concept design for $19,600, and then on Exhibit B, there is a Civic Center Master Planning as well as Civic Center Graphic Visualization renderings That totals 19.5. Are we talking the same thing?
Eric, you want to elaborate, please?
That's what I asked earlier.
Oh, sorry, Scott.
Yeah, no, it seems like it.
I don't have the exhibits in front of me. What is Exhibit A?
Exhibit A, go ahead, Mike.
Says site analysis and concept design
Is,
for 19,600.
is Exhibit A our original agreement?
That was correct, dated May of 19.
All right, that is only for the town hall building.
Okay. Okay, so I need to go to Exhibit B. So the 19.5 that Rick made the motion for is for the Civic Center master planning concept development, as well as the graphic visualization. And I guess then that is what we've been talking about today.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like that's eerily similar to what we're looking at.
Okay, so I gave Rick my support.
They are two different things. Okay. You know, the spatial planning of the building is one thing, the architectural design of the master planning is another, and the visual graphics of what potentially the area could look like are another. And that's what this is. This is, again, this is Exhibit B. It's the Civic Center Master Planning Concept Development and the Civic Center Graphic Visualization Renderings. Okay, I made a motion. I have support. I'm looking for a roll call vote.
Mr. Supervisor, just, you're freezing a few times on me. So your motion is for Exhibit B? I just want to be clear.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. So I'm looking for, we have motion and support, looking for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Smith,
And I'm sorry, I'm unable to pull up B. So B is the, can you repeat what Exhibit B is? I'm so sorry, you guys are freezing on me.
Exhibit B is the Civic Center Master Planning Concept Development and a Civic Center Graphic Visualization Renderings for 19,500.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna vote nay.
Andrea Voorhees,
Yes.
Mike Hall,
No.
Ruggles,
No,
Mr. Roman,
I'm a yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Kowal,
Yes. Yes.
I believe we have 4 yes.
Yes, we do.
No.
Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, seeing as we have no other business this evening, I make a motion to adjourn. Looking for support.
Support.
Andrew,
Motion
Give
support
it to Andrea.
by Andrea. Roll call vote, please.
Wall,
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Roman,
Yes.
Scott Ruggles,
yes.
Mike Powell,
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees,
yes.
Liz Smith,
Yes, and I'm so sorry to make you repeat. I can hear you now.
Good night, everyone. Thank you very much. Howard, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you. And ladies, and all the committee members of both committees, thank you very, very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank
Good night,
you.
all.
Thank you. Good night.
good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.